church and candy. Or eating candy in church. No, thank you. I don't do it for church, by the way. I think I left it on my desk. I'd like to call this regular board meeting of the Saugatuck Township Board to order at 6:09 p.m. on February 12, 2020. Now call roll. Comrade?
Here.
Bickford? Here. Marcy? Here. Please note that Trustee Aldridge is absent due to an illness in her family, and Supervisor Osmond is gone on a planned vacation. Please join.
Could I make a motion?
Sure.
That tonight, because of what you just said, that our fellow trustee and clerk, Abby Bigford, be the chair of tonight's board meeting.
Do you have support? Yep, I support. Any more discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Brings us to item number 4 on our agenda. We have Dan Veldhuizen, and he is going to present our audit results from the 2018-2019 fiscal year.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for asking me. I think I've been working with the township for about 20 years now, but I think this is the first meeting that it's attending, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity and enjoy the long-term relationship, especially that you continued that relationship when all of you were new in the last year. One thing that I think is important to know from your auditor is that we enjoy working with the people here, and they all are making quite an effort to improve their capabilities and the processes here at the township. I usually don't say this, but I think Griffin is a terrific manager for you. He's one of the better young managers that I work with. So you've got to have good people in place. I won't take up too much of your time, but I'd like to talk to you about 2 key things that I think you should hear about from your auditors, and those are auditor communications and some comments about your financial position. Do you all have the financial statements in front of you? I won't refer to a whole lot of that, but I always like to look at the independent auditor's report, which is the page immediately after the table of contents. Especially since I've had a chance to meet with you before, I'd like to talk about some of the basic concepts here. I think you have that in front of you, Abby, there. It's going to be page 10 and 11.
Right. Yep, I'm on it.
It's actually the page immediately after the table of contents. It doesn't have a number on it. You think we put some numbers on those? But
We numbered it.
Okay.
It's numbered in our packet.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right. Well, there's some key concepts here, and first of all, this is what you hired us to do. It's the only page in this document that belongs exclusively to us. And we talk about that a little bit in the report where we discuss responsibilities. That says management's responsibility is to prepare the financial statements, and you have responsibility for the internal controls, the checks and balances you have in place over recording the transactions. That's really Griffin and everybody else's responsibility as management. Even though we help to prepare the statements, it's our responsibility to express opinions on these financial statements. There's too often there are misunderstandings about what an audit is, and oftentimes people think it's a fraud examination or everything's perfect when we're done. Neither of those things is necessarily true. We're giving an opinion about whether everything is in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We do that at the very bottom of that first page under opinions, where we say that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. That's known as an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. Far too often I hear in the media that the auditor gave a clean opinion, so everything must be fine. That's not necessarily true. If you looked online at the 1,800 governmental units in the state of Michigan, I guarantee you that all but maybe one or two would read exactly like this, word for word. And that's because auditors continue to give you adjustments or corrections to your internal reports to allow us to give that unmodified opinion. So what you really want to know is how many corrections did we have to make to allow us or enable us to give that opinion. And we talk about that a little bit in another communication that we issue. It's not within the bound document, but it's another 3 or 4 page report. It's on our letterhead. I think you have that as well.
Page 3, the letter.
Yes. At the bottom of the second page of that document, we talk about communications regarding internal control. I won't go through all of this. It's a relatively new report that auditors have to issue. We have to put in writing about 6 or 7 different things, but one of those that usually gets a lot of attention is items regarding internal controls. So if we find any problems in internal control, we have to communicate those to you and to the state in writing. So on the third page, you'll see that we said that there was something called a material weakness related to audit adjustments and financial statement preparation. First of all, I didn't come up with the terms material weakness and significant deficiency for that. But we say that there was a material weakness because we made a number of adjustments to your records. You can see towards the middle of the page under those bullet points, we helped you record things like year-end accruals of receivables and payables. Just so you know, we call it a material weakness, which seems very serious, but it's very typical. We work with 100 governments, and I think all but about 5 of them don't get this communication. So we help most of our governmental clients with a number of adjustments, oftentimes more than this. So I think everybody here did a nice job with recording all the transactions that they needed to have the cash basis transactions recorded correctly, and we helped with those accrual adjustments at the end of the year. So that's important to know. On the next page, there was another item that we labeled as a significant deficiency. It's not as important as a material weakness, but there were bank or cash account reconciliations that were not done in a timely manner for several months. And that's because of the transition that you had. Anytime there's not timely reconciliations, that's something that we have to report on. But in your situation, you had new people that weren't familiar with those roles for a while. By the end of your fiscal year, that was all done, and I assume now everything's working well. So it's always difficult when you have a transition, when you have to change over in quite a few people. So we did that, but after that time, I would say as your auditor that things look really good. Just a few comments about the financial condition, and for that, I'd like to look at page 13. Because we haven't talked about these things before, I'd like to look at your balance sheet and your statement of revenues and expenditures. Page 13 is a balance sheet or a picture at a point in time, if you will, at the end of your fiscal year, which is way back last June. Make sure these are there.
R13.
No, it's
R
13 at their report.
Now they all have 2 numbers. Balance sheet. Thank you.
Those numbers are getting pretty small, or I'm getting older, so that seeing that as well. It's a lot of information.
I was going to say, wait, no, they're not. The dollars aren't shrinking that much.
The font.
I know.
The font is true.
It is very small. I learned a long time ago that the average person can handle about 6 numbers on a piece of paper, so this can be a little overwhelming to a lot of people. But just want to point out a few things here. The column to your left is the general fund, your primary operating fund. You see it has total assets of $893,000, some liabilities, and then a fund balance. The fundamental accounting equation is assets less liabilities equals fund balance, or equity. And your equity is about $800,000, $801,000. People always ask me, what's a good fund balance number? And only you can answer that question. But I look at a lot of these, so I can tell you that I think a governmental fund or your general fund is a lot like an individual's finances, where if you have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses set aside for emergency purposes, you're in pretty good shape. So I measure that fund balance compared to your expenditures, which you can see on the next page, and it represents 135% of recurring expenditures. So it's a very healthy fund balance. It's not excessive at all. Many township boards that I work with like to see 100% fund balance. And I think that's fairly typical. A number of years ago, probably the average township in the state would be at 75%. So certainly not excessive, but we have some things that you could do with that. The column to the right are your other governmental funds, like the road fund that has $1.5 million in it, the sewer debt fund, as well as several non-major funds. Those are all very healthy. It's really quite good that you have a capital project fund. More and more of the townships I work with are establishing capital projects, so you set aside money, really assign that for specific capital projects, and you have $133,000 available for that. So that's terrific. So the funds of the township are all very healthy, and the township as a whole. There probably is one financial concern that relates to your defined benefit plan. In my document, that's on page 30, that's quite a few pages back near the end of the report.
40 for us.
Yes.
And this has been a concern for some time, but again, there's a lot of numbers on this page, but if you look at the column to the left, that's the most recent year. The first subtotal says that your total pension liability is roughly $800,000. Go to the next subtotal, your fiduciary net position, the assets you have available are about $328,000. So your net pension liability is $467,000. That means that the liability is 41% funded. The state really, there's a relatively new law that says they really want you to be at 60%. In your case, it's not. There's two criteria. It has to be 60% and a significant part of your governmental revenues. Your contribution is still fairly low, so you're not in violation of state law or anything. But 60% is really where they want you to be at. Probably 10 years ago, actuaries would tell you if you're 50% funded, you're in good shape because you don't have to pay this all tomorrow. You pay it over the next 30 years. But now there's so much more focus on these unfunded liabilities that they want you to be at least 60%. MERS would tell you 80% probably. So that's the one financial concern that you have. There are opportunities to take money out of your general fund with the fund balance you have to cover some of that, but there are other opportunities to use that as well.
Can I comment on that, Michael? Because, of course, this is last fiscal year, right, and now we're operating under a budget that was our first budget that took effect July 1st. We did address that and make a substantial increase in our contribution to the pension plan. And we reviewed the old numbers. We worked very closely with MERS, who is the provider, and this board is committed to getting that to 60%.
Okay.
As you know, we don't know what that is till a year later,
right,
but I'm forgetting the number now, but we made a substantial change.
Okay.
Because we think that had been, not as closely watched as it should have been, and we made that change.
Okay. I think that's terrific.
Thank you for that.
There's nothing unlawful about having that lower funding percentage, but
There's the 60% watch list.
they really want to be at 60%.
Yeah, the state's watching.
I could probably talk a lot longer about your financial statements, but
We like the positive stuff.
I like to try to point out positive things. I would tell you, just in summary, the financial statement of the township is really financially healthy, and the people you have in place are very capable and working to continue to improve. So, especially like to see those policies, Griffin. That's a real improvement to have this thing right.
I'd like to just thank you again and your staff for dealing with us during the transition.
Sure.
And I found it a pleasure working with you. You gave us extra support that probably you don't have to do that often pre-audit, and things have improved immensely. There is a level of communication on a daily basis between myself, treasurer, and our deputy clerk on all things financial that was not encouraged a year ago. So, again, I appreciate your patience, and I'm sure you things are much running smooth.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's what we're here for.
Okay.
Hold on. But I can answer any questions now or throughout the year. detailed questions now and spend too much time, but we're always available to answer any questions or related to concerns throughout the year. We're there to help.
Do you know offhand, or I mean, if you don't, I noticed that there was a significant drop from last year and the previous year in the grant received column. Do we know what grants those were? Just historically, I'm curious.
Last year, the grant had to do with the bike path.
Okay.
It was over $500,000,
Okay.
if I remember right. So, yeah,
Thank
I didn't go into the government-wide financial statements, the fund statements, so usually.
I know, so that one just stuck out to me, and I'm just wondering what grant was in place. Okay, thank you.
You had a significant increase in your overall net position
Right.
last year because of those grants. Basically, somebody gave you a $500,000 asset, and there were no costs related to it.
Cool.
That's all I have. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dan. We
Yeah.
appreciate you.
You should stick around for my report.
All right.
You don't have to. I'll send one to you.
Okay.
That leads us to the, public comment portion of the meeting. You're jumping.
I know.
We have several things ahead of each other.
Touche.
Let me remind you that it is, limited to 3 minutes for if you're speaking as an individual and 5 minutes if you're speaking on behalf of a group. And Manager Graham will be timing you on the big screen so you can manage your own time. And we can pay attention to what you're saying. Anyone in the first row? Second?
Jim Searing, Saugatuck Township, and I'm on the Park Commission. The comment about the capital project fund, I would hope that, and I'm not clear exactly if we had some money available, that it would be possible to add a little bit of money. I'm hoping that each fiscal year, when we close the books and so forth, that if there is some additional money, we could now allocate it either to the Parks Project Fund or the capital improvement funds. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you for advocating for our parks, Jim. Anyone else in the second row? Third row? Fourth row?
Can I speak from here?
Yeah.
No?
We'd rather you do.
So we can get you recorded
Oh, okay.
properly.
Yeah, there's microphones and recording.
And we have to kind of take minutes on different things and record your name and such. Sorry, we're not trying to be painful.
Okay. Hi, Mike Worth. I live right down the street here in Saugatuck Township. Just a question, when I heard pension, I know a lot of companies are doing away with pensions and going to a more of a 401k contribution. I was just wondering if that's ever been considered for the township. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else in that room?
Hi, Don Skipper, 3438 Research Drive, Saugatuck Township. Three comments quickly. One, I've got 2 unsolicited comments from construction personnel working on our project, who have given reports that they've never visited a friendlier township than Saugatuck Township. And they're used to going in and being treated with somewhat of a hostile basis when they go in. They're just amazed. And so thank you, and thank the township staff for that. Number 2, thank you very much for taking up our plea of poverty on the sewer adjustment issue this evening. And number 3, if you do find some time, in all of your spare time, to work on a reassignment of REUs in the next 2 years, it would be very, very much appreciated. John will be back in about 18 months and about 12 months after that with a report of our actual usage, in hoping that we can work out a blended approach using the 2 different classifications that were available on the report from Prime. And we were treated as a wet water process facility with our usage-based experience determining our REU classification. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in that row? Mr. Scappa? All right, we'll close the public comment section and move to approval of the agenda. Trustee we've all had a chance to look over the agenda. With that said, I will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
So to approve today's agenda.
I'll support.
Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion approved, 3-0. Brings us to a review of, the invoices, accounts payable, credit card statement, payroll, et cetera. Are there any questions or clarification needed on any of this information? Again, I trust that you've had a chance to look it over. And did you have anything on?
I'll make some comments in my report, so.
Ms. Marcy?
Nope.
Well, I'll move to approve all bills and payroll in the amount of $51,335.83 as presented.
I will support.
And that includes the additional ones submitted today on this list.
Any discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Now that leaves us
All
with the
right.
treasurer's report.
The reason everybody's here. Thank you. All right, my reports for February 12th, 2020. I always share with the board and the public. Our general fund bank balance, some of that was alluded to by the auditor, but we are, in terms of cash on hand at the bank, as of yesterday, at $2.66 million. This is down $40,000 from last month, and that's strictly due to the timing of the tax disbursements that we make back to ourselves for certain categories, like administration and the cemetery, the roads. Just FYI, we owe ourselves $185,000 this week, and that will get transferred probably on Friday. In terms of budget versus actual spending through January, we're at a net $16,000 positive, and spending is running about $70,000 under budget year to date. In fact, our end of January numbers are, in terms of the percentage used, are closer to what we would have thought halfway through 6 months in. So it's almost like we're in a very positive situation. Our only investment, as you all know, is a CD with Chemical Bank, and that's just like clockwork. It goes up about $1,000 a month. Doesn't keep pace with the stock market, but we're at $740,000. The last statement. Year to date, looking at our budget through January 31st, I'd like to point out when anything is kind of notable, and these are not that big, but we did spend almost $140,000 in January on road activity, and then we renewed Muni Code, which we need to keep our ordinances online, and it's a valuable tool for our zoning administrator, and that's an annual renewal of $2,000. I think everyone knows that the due date for winter taxes is this Friday, February 14th, otherwise known as Valentine's Day. I would like to tonight, because the timing is always off with the board meeting, but the board does have to vote to approve the disbursements that I make to our taxpayers. So today, I would like to collectively get approval for the disbursement made on January 13th and January 28th, and the ones being made this week dated February 11th. Those three total $1.979 million. And just as reference, there will be 3 more disbursements paid out by the end of March. So I'm going to move that the board approve these 3 specific disbursement payments to our tax partners that total $1.979 million.
No, 1 second.
I would, discussion.
Okay.
I will, no, you're in the right order. Is it okay with the person who moved and the person who seconded, if I include in my minutes the dates, the January 13, 28, and 11.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
important. And just so everyone knows, because I don't put this in the packet, every disbursement date has a page that shows exactly the amount paid to each of the different partners. I have a book with all those. If you ever want to look at that, you're more than happy.
Any more discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approved, 3-0. Leads us to item number 9 on the agenda, which is the approval of the January 8, 2020 regular township board meeting.
I'd like to move.
Okay.
What?
Okay,
You can comment. Okay. I'd like to move that we approve the minutes as presented here tonight of our January 8th, 2020 board meeting.
I will second.
Discussion. Just to be totally transparent, thank you, John, for helping me. Sometimes our meetings are on the long side, and the minutes are long as well. And I want to thank you for helping me proofread. The proofreading is only for grammatical and spelling errors, or if I got a name wrong or something like that. It saves us some time during the meeting, but of course, any substantive, is that?
Or material.
Right.
Or material, yeah.
Right, that I've missed would be corrected. So if you're willing to do that in the future, I would welcome that.
I am a noted proofreader.
Yeah, I know you take pride in it. And I don't have to have all my mistakes. No.
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Correspondence. Did we get some late correspondence?
One, the North Shore's attorney, Mr. Peralty, is in front of you.
Okay. And that came in yesterday?
Yesterday.
Late yesterday. Okay. I was at a clerk's meeting and training all day today, so I have not had a chance to look this over. I will, and it will be added to the official packet here at the township. Do we have any other correspondence? Gotta keep this up in order here.
It's hard. Even with the numbers.
I know. All right, that brings us to item number 11, unfinished business. And the first subcategory A is ambulance service agreement amendment and budget amendment. And I would like for Manager Graham to take the lead on this and kind of give us some information on this.
Sure, thank you very much. As is in front of you in the packet, and as we've discussed in previous meetings, there's been a lot of history associated with the township and our current ambulance provider, AMR. To be brief, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, we've been approached by AMR. They're interested in increasing the current subsidy required for them to provide service to the southern half of the township. There are some concerns from the Emergency Services Committee in regard to that. So what they were willing to do was put together a one-year agreement that would lock us in between now and the end of July. So it'll be July 31st, 2020. However, one of the concerns related to that was the township reinstated the ambulance special assessment district at the amount needed based on the previously proposed agreement. And now that there have been changes, that amount has gone up based on the amount in a previous agreement that the township was not a party of. My concern remains that we've reinstated a funding source based on the original amendments that were presented to us. However, I do recommend that the township board authorize this agreement. allocate the additional funding necessary to cover the increase. It would be approximately $500. This will secure the short term, give the Emergency Services Committee enough time, hopefully, to find a longer term solution. And if I can be very blunt, even though there are some confusions and some frustrations associated with some of the steps taken, it's not worth the fight for $500. Is about as blunt as I can be in relation to this. So I would recommend that the Township Board approve this agreement, get the Township Board locked in through July 31st, and then either at this meeting or at a future meeting, give the Emergency Services Committee more direction on what you all would like to see in terms of a longer-term solution. The last thing I would say is I do think we owe it to the residents in the southern half of the township. When you talk about they had ambulance coverage, there were some changes over previous years. We reinstated it, or the Township Board reinstated it in August this year, and then in October reinstated the Special Assessment District. With these changes, I think getting some stability in the short term is valuable, not only to the township, but to the residents who live in the southern half.
And just a reminder, since December 1st, the winter tax bills have been collecting this assessment on those properties south of the Kalamazoo River.
Do you have any concerns
No.
from taxpayers?
None. But on the other hand, it's like with the disbursement, that money's supposed to go to AMR. That's how we budgeted it, so I'd like to be in that position where maybe they bill us for what we already owe them before the next fiscal year starts, regardless of what happens with the contract, so.
John brings up
It's for frustration.
John brings up a great point. I think another piece of this too is with accepting this agreement, let's get this 1 year locked in. Let's clarify our obligation with AMR between now and the end of the term of this agreement. So then if the township decides to move forward with a long-term agreement with them, we can start fresh, but otherwise we would be able to walk away cleanly, where right now with some of the confusion over the last year and a half, it would be a more interesting and potentially risky situation for the township. So again, staff's recommendation is to accept this as presented.
So I understand authorizing the extra $500 and to go into the agreement with them until ending July 31st. And you talked a little bit about long-term solutions. That's not going to be discussed right now, or?
You all are welcome to discuss that right now. Our emergency service representative, Tony Shippa, is here. We've continued to stay in contact in regard to this. I know he's planning to give a brief update during committee reports at the end. I think what is important is, in the long term, the Emergency Services Committee is the ones who represent this number of jurisdictions for ambulance service in that area. But I do think it's important for the township to not overstep, let the Emergency Services Committee take the lead, let them use their expertise to move forward, and balance that with the Township Board giving them direction and clarify your expectations and what you all would like to see.
Would you like a motion?
Sure, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the authorization of the AMR Ambulance Service Agreement Amendment that concludes on July 31st, 2020, and direct the Township Clerk and Township Supervisor to sign it on the Township's behalf.
I'll support.
Any further discussion? Not a roll call, is that being just an agreement? No, okay. There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Can we just move on then? Second motion.
So we need I'd like to further move
Yeah.
to approve the requested February 2020 budget amendments as submitted by the township manager, not exceed $500 in additional budget assigned to AMR.
So if the board is comfortable, I would encourage you to reviewed the sample motion provided, and you can see the document that will outline specifically what those amendments are.
Where is that?
It's on page 68 of your packet.
Sorry for that.
So anything beyond that would, require further action?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, exactly what is on there is what's being requested.
Okay.
All right, then you can strike my budget limitation and, should I restate the motion?
If you wouldn't mind.
Okay. I move to approve the requested February 2020 budget amendments as submitted by the township manager.
I will second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Okay, that brings us to 11B, 236 Culvert LC connection fees agreement. And again, I will let Manager Graham give us an overview and some information on this.
Sure. As Mr. Schipper kindly mentioned earlier, we've been interacting with him and his business partner over the last several months in regard to their development by the exit 36 interchange. But specifically on January 8th, the Township Board directed staff to work with legal counsel to prepare an agreement outlining a payment installment plan associated with the connection fees for their development. Included in your packet is an agreement that was prepared by Township Attorney Ron Dolce. It was then reviewed by myself and the developer and is in front of you for consideration. If the Township Board is comfortable moving forward, staff will then work to execute the agreement with the developer. I'm happy to answer any questions. If I can bring up, highlight one point in the agreement. Section 11 of the agreement states that the township has the right, according to its own incomplete discretion, to reduce the total fee under this contract by adjusting the REUs applicable to payers' operation on the site. The township does not guarantee or commit to any such reduction. I point this out because I know this was one of the points that the board paid particular attention to, that there was interest in potentially reviewing or reducing the REUs used for this specific development. Working with the attorney, we made sure that the specific clause was included so the Township Board would have the option to review moving forward if they so desire.
And I know we had directed you to work with Dana Bird, or an engineer, probably Dana Bird, to have him come up with a proposal of what that would look like if we were to review those REUs. Have that been pursued as of now?
Yes. So Dana followed up with me recently, and like a lot of things that involve utilities, and especially in this area, the short answer is it's complicated. Prine and Newhoff can do some research into various communities. If you just want someone to pull comparable REU factors, really anyone can do that. Staff could do it. We could hire Prine and Newhoff to do it. At the end of the day, it would take a couple hours, and we could do that. I think the important piece to note, and what the basis of the conversation between our engineer and staff has been, and I'll try to read this exactly, is my concern with just pulling comparable REU factors from other communities is that we don't really know how they set their rates, obligations, zoning, etc. as a basis for those factors. So one of the things that we should consider is, if we want to move forward and do a thorough review, would be have conversations with organizations such as a Baker Tilly or other financial utility consultants, and we would really need to combine the work of township staff, the township's engineering firm, and a potential consultant to do a thorough review, considering things like capital basis for our water and sewer systems, ownership obligations, fee structures, zoning and financial assumptions, as we've discussed before, and I apologize that I don't have a clear answer, is it's just complicated. And making any, what we may think is minor adjustments to an REU schedule can have long-term consequences. So it's my feeling that if we want to do this, let's do it right. I think the problem with that is the estimate that Dana was able to put together for us is between engineering time and the time of a utility financial consultant, we'd be looking at probably $10,000 to $20,000 over several months of work.
I just want to comment, I've made this comment every month, I think, for the last 3 months. I still think it's critical that we address as soon as we can, whether it requires the full exhaustive review or something more focused, addressing REU connection fees for new businesses that never existed in the state of Michigan until this year and now exist in our township. I don't want to see that take a year or two to address that issue. I think our supervisor pulled some comparables, and I'm not saying comparables are, that's the only way to go. But I'd like to see us look at this further in a more timely manner. Bearing in mind, cost-wise, we've brought in this calendar year about, I think it's 30,000, it might even be 35,000 in new fees collected from these new businesses, which are obviously the growth and provisioning centers in the medical marijuana. And now we had our first payment last week for a medically approved facility now transitioning to adult use.
I think you bring up a really important point of how new an industry this is, and I recognize the desire for wanting to move forward quickly. I'm going to urge patience just because there's so many things that are still being figured out at the state level in regard to both medical and adult use marijuana, and I'm going to advocate that that's the exact reason we would want to do a very thorough review, even if it is targeted specifically towards these types of businesses, but because it's so new, we don't know the potential implications long-term on our system.
As far as I know, the board has supported the idea of reviewing the REU schedule, and it hasn't been done in quite some time. And I think we should do that as soon as possible, but we do need to be cautious and take our time to do it right. So that was a little related, but not totally to,
Well, I'd like to move to approve the proposed connection fee agreement as presented and authorize the township supervisor and township clerk to execute the agreement with the applicable parties.
I will second.
any more discussion? There being none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. That brings us to the new business section.
Township board goals.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
The new business.
We have one more unfinished.
Oh, sorry, I stand corrected, thank you. We're still under unfinished business, 11C, 2020 Township Goals. Township Board met for a goal and priority setting workshop on December 14. Manager Graham has compiled a lot of the findings from that session, from all the work that we did that day. And I think he's going to present some of the focus goals that came about from them and where we go from there.
Sure. I'm really happy to present this to all of you. As you've mentioned, this has been a long time coming. We started with the goal and priority session before the new year, where we had a facilitator come down and work with the board. You can see in this really compiled 2020 Township Board Goals document really walks through the process. So it starts with the results and the materials of that workshop. The next step is the draft Saugatuck Board 2020 priority list, which is a combination of some of the highest ranked items from the workshop as well as ongoing projects that can be seen in the master projects list later in the packet. As directed at the last meeting, staff put together a priority list based on not only the feedback given by the board at the workshop, but also what projects we have been spending the most time and have really been directed to prioritize more informally over the last year until we were able to get a more formal document like this together. So I'd really like for you all to pay special attention to page 84, which is the 2020 priority list. This is a list that could be shared, that could be published on our website, that really shows, or what the intention is to really show what you all would like to see the township focused on over the next year. However, I'd also like to draw your attention to this document alone gives staff and gives residents very little direction. For example, an item on here being ambulance service. We talked about that before. We spent a lot of time in ambulance service over the last year, and with things still changing, it's my advice that this would not be a time to stop prioritizing that issue. But just looking at the priority list, ambulance service shows you very little. That's why following this in this document, I also included what I'm calling a business plan, and that breaks down each one of those goals into not only a current overview and a little bit of background, it presents some anticipated actions, an estimated timeline, outcome indicators, and some potential next steps. Recognizing that, like everything we tend to do, this is a living document in terms of anticipated actions, timelines, outcomes. Things could change, they more than likely will change, but staff's intention of putting this together is to take one step farther from what are your priorities to some actionable next items to give staff some direction on where we would go. The one other example I will use is one of the highest ranked items at the workshop was to upgrade facilities. But there was very little direction on what that means, and again, to be very blunt, just saying to upgrade the facilities puts me as a manager in a really tough position. Because upgrading facilities, does that mean replace the carpets? Does upgrade facilities mean you want a brand new building on a new site with all new furniture? I mean, we could be talking about a very wide range of items, and that's why I put this business plan together, because, again, my goal is to carry out all of your goals, and to be able to do that, I need more direction on what those are. So for a lot of these you may see, and I'll use that as an example, is it talks a lot about clarifying expectations, and the outcome being the township board feels they receive satisfactory information to inform their discussions regarding next steps. A lot of these aren't going to be accomplished in 1 year, we know that, and that's why the business plan hopefully shows the path forward. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, but happy to put that in front of you today.
Want me to take a deep breath?
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to your thoughts on capacity at this point to accomplish all of these goals? And I know they don't all occur at the same time.
I think that's exactly why I also in here we kind of have a calendar, or we have some anticipated dates, because that is a great. I think it's ambitious to think we're going to be able to do everything outlined in here, but I think when you're talking about goals, ambitious is good. There are obviously going to be things that come up there that may take priority, and we may have to move things on this list and take other things off, but I also think it's important to have a starting point. As you all know, I guess it's been 7 or 8 months since I've been here now, we've been able to accomplish quite a bit, and I hope to be able to continue to move on that clip. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the organization has limited not only staff capacity, but financial capacity, and I think that's what's important when you